Perfect. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thanks, TALMO. So I'm super interested in how AI will evolve our teaching and learning experience, particularly within statistics. I don't have all of the answers. I'll be giving an overall kind of overarching talk on AI and statistical education, our opportunities and challenges. But because I don't have the answers, I think it's a great opportunity to have these discussions, to see what other people are doing. Maybe people are creating cool novel types of assessments. Maybe they're altering their teaching methods. Maybe we need to discuss training the educators, because when we studied, AI wasn't very prevalent or sophisticated. So really, it's about educating both students and educators. Perhaps people have done studies on how students are using AI, or they've just noticed it. We really encourage you to put this into the chat and to have discussions. We've got a few Mentimeter questions throughout the talks, and some of those are repeats from when we presented at the UK CUTS, so the UK Conference on Teaching Statistics last year. And we thought we'd run the same questions again to see how things are changing in time. So yeah, a big thanks to all of our speakers today representing Glasgow and Edinburgh. So I'm Jenn Gaskell from Glasgow. So starting off with some questions. Can AI be used to enhance teaching and learning in statistics? And data analytics specifically is my interest. And I think it's a big yes. I'm quite pro AI, but obviously we need to do this ethically and responsibly. So how can we do this? And what are the implications for both educators and students? Very open questions at the moment, but I like to have discussions around these. And I also really like using GenCraft to generate images. Sometimes it's a bit more successful than others. I think this is the least successful, but my prompt here was a statistical educator using AI. Not quite sure what's going on here, but maybe this is all going to be us in 6 months' time. So AI is a very powerful tool. I use it for many jobs myself, particularly for coding, as I do a lot of coding in Python. And for me, it's quite successful because I've already been coding in Python for 10 years and I can critique it quite well. I know what I should be expecting. I know how I should test it. But for a student experience, if you're new to programming, then it can be quite different and less successful. It can be used for translating. So perhaps you're working with people in different fields. Maybe you're working with biologists using Julia or R, and your programming language is Python. So perhaps you want to translate code. Obviously, you should check code translations. And I think it's becoming more prevalent that we teach statistical students Python as well as R. So traditionally, most of our notes and statistics are in R, but we're introducing this toggle. So shout out to Vinny for generating this nice image, also via GenCraft. About our R Python toggle. So we're encouraging students to look at how to solve problems in both languages, and we've integrated this toggle. I think Vinny will talk about this a little bit more. Or you could also be translating different technical terms if you're working in interdisciplinary fields. Perhaps the biologists talk in a different way to the statisticians. So it can help translate meeting notes for both sides. It's great for introducing workflow ideas. So if you're working with experimentalists, say an experimental physicist, and you need a timeline for when data will be collected, I've found it can be quite neat at organizing the schedule for everyone, particularly big teams. For statistics, it's great for data pre-processing, so dealing with missing data and registering anomalies. Great for visualization. So rather than writing the code yourself, perhaps using AI to generate the code for the best visualization, or for generating nice GenCraft images for your presentations. And I say co-writing reports and co-writing grants because obviously you have to come up with a good idea yourself and feed this into a prompt, and then you'd want to edit it into your own style. But perhaps you're writing grants with many people and all the people have different kind of voices, and you want it to be more of one voice. So you can use it for editing out styles. So the evolving landscape of statistical education. So the modern workplace is rapidly evolving. So a lot of my friends in industry, they constantly use generative AI throughout the day. And statistical education should really adapt to prepare our students to enter this workplace. So we used to traditionally teach some statistical theory. We then apply this with R or SAS or Python and develop some analytical thinking skills. But today our students are going to need skills dealing with big data because we collect ever more data. We're going to need machine learning. We're increasingly the complexity of most models, so interpreting those complex models, dealing with large-scale computing, so running things on GPUs, and dealing with version control, so collaborative coding, and joining big teams and making sure that you have some history of the versions of your code. And these are really the skills that we need, but also critiquing and editing outputs of AI, using AI in a collaborative way to find the best solution, critically thinking about your prompts, but also your outputs, and how you're going to unit test those outputs. So in Python, we write unit tests. So you think in advance what output you're expecting and how you know if it was working. So AI for educators, how can we use it well in our teaching? So it's quite good for generating additional examples. You should obviously check all of your examples before you present them, but it's quite nice to think of different examples. Perhaps you've got some very football oriented students and you don't know too much about football and you want a football question. It can be a nice way to generate that. Generating additional quiz questions. I use it myself for making synthetic data sets. So if in a previous exam, I've had just lots of different parks, and rather than thinking of lots of park names myself, I just generated lots of unique park names for this data set and then induced a certain amount of missingness into the data. And then it's really quite a controlled data set. You can use it for co-writing explanations for different audience levels. So perhaps you teach Python to multiple levels, and some students might have experience in R, some might not. And then you can run that by ChatGPT with a student that's done R, understand this code, for example. I think we should move to more novel assessments that do represent the modern workplace. So encouraging critical thinking, comparing student solutions to generated solutions, which ensures that the students try to write their own solutions as well as generating them, and critiquing the differences between them. And AI collaborative tasks, because a lot of the time we are now collaborating with AI to find the one best solution. It can be great for providing feedback summaries for a whole class. So if you've marked a whole load of reports and then you just want to feed in a general report summary for the whole class, it can be nice. But you should think about the ethical implications of passing this data into the AI. So you might want to anonymize it first. It can be great for debugging code. So often when I see Python code and there's one small error in there, it might take me a while to find it. But if I can pass this in to generative AI and highlight the bug, then that frees up some of my time for deeper student interaction and thinking about why students are making these errors consistently. AI for students. So it can help the students understand different concepts by breaking down the topics or summarizing content. They can use it for discussion, for example, comparing different statistical methods for a given data set. So perhaps they've thought, I'm going to use method X, but they see the lecturers use method Y. Perhaps they're a little shy to ask, but they can discuss this with generative AI and ask questions around the suitability of that method. And they might want to learn about novel methods outside of the scope of the course when they start doing more advanced projects, or using it for debugging their own code, or perhaps they've written some code that successfully works, but they want to know if it could be optimized, because often we mark code right or wrong, but perhaps don't give as many tips on code optimization as we should. And AI tutors are becoming quite successful. So I don't know if you've tried the Khan Go on the Khan Academy, or the Coursera Coach. These are quite successful in generating additional questions based on the content of that course, or explaining it in different ways. So you can ask more questions on that given topic, and it works with the data around that course. So critical teachings, I think one of the key things we need to teach our students is how GPTs work, so generated pre-trained transformers. They need a basic understanding. It's a probabilistic model predicting the next token rather than actually having knowledge. So, sorry, losing my voice. So it takes these tokens. So you say the sky is, then it splits the previous sentence or the prompt into tokens, and then it predicts with some probability what the next word would be. So it doesn't actually know anything about the sky. It just knows from its data set that the probability that the next word is blue is quite high, and the probability of the is quite low in this case. And once you start to understand that it's only predicting the next token and it doesn't have specific knowledge, then you start to use GPTs in a different way. So when to Google versus when to ChatGPT. I have a friend that was ChatGPTing everything, but when it comes to, say, looking at avalanche reports for going skiing, when you pass this into ChatGPT, it will generate quite a nice looking avalanche report. But if you haven't got the search mode on, the web search mode, then it's just generating given this token, and it doesn't know anything about the avalanche safety. So it can be very unsafe, and you'd be better off Googling to find the avalanche conditions, to find a good website for that. And we should teach our students that AI outputs can be biased due to the training data. And to be aware of data security. So what are you passing in to the AI? So challenges and ethical considerations. AI generated responses can sometimes be incorrect or misleading. So students must be trained to verify the results critically. And not all students have equal access to AI tools. So if a student is using pro version, perhaps they can do better than a student that's using the free version. But some studies have shown that actually we do get a decrease in performance gap as long as all students have some AI access. Sorry. And intellectual development, we must ensure students do not bypass our updated intended learning outcomes or develop an over-reliance on AI. So when I'm teaching basic coding, they really need to learn these basic coding skills before they start generating code, because they don't know how to critique the code until they've studied how to code first. So best practices for integrating AI into statistical education. We need to teach them about critically evaluating their outputs. For example, unit testing the code and thinking about the result pre-generation. So how will they know whether it's right? How will they test it? Using AI as a supplement rather than a replacement for traditional teaching. So perhaps asking the teacher if they have any questions, but if it's out of hours, maybe trying an AI tutor and then validating the result with the teacher in the morning. Encouraging students to compare AI-generated solutions with their manual approaches. So trying their best first before they then pass it into the AI, and incorporating discussions on these ethical implications. We want to ensure students can still problem solve. Perhaps they don't need to remember as much information. But they will still need to be able to solve problems for industries when perhaps they might not be able to pass their problem into AI, such as working in industries like defense and banking. So what we're doing currently, we're trying to do the first round. We really tried to maintain academic integrity, and inspired by Michael Grove's talk, we added this traffic light to our Moodle pages to encourage students to think about their AI usage. So we have three lights. So a red light is we don't want them to use it at all, because it's perhaps an exam testing their basic knowledge. An orange light might be a coding lab, so they should really try the problem themselves. They should maybe discuss with their friends or a tutor. And then if in doubt, maybe ask further questions to the AI. And a green light for using generative AI freely. Perhaps you're collaborating with AI to find the best solution, or perhaps you're comparing your own manual approach to an AI approach. And also, I was writing additional assessments, novel assessments that can less readily be solved by generative AI. So I'll give you an example of the Buffalo question. So the Buffalo question is for our online master's course, where the students, they're trying to learn basic Python programming skills, such as writing a class or defining a function. The students quite new to programming, or they might have experience in R. And the assessments are take-home open book assignments with a generous time window, and they have access to the internet throughout. So the questions are quite basic, defining a function. So we created this game called Needle, which is quite similar to Wordle, but slightly different colors and rules. And when we passed this into ChatGPT, it performed very well. So excellent code, well written, and neater than the lecturer. So it mostly scored 100% on our previous assessments. So what to do when we still want to teach basic programming, statistics and mathematics, but we also want to teach skills relevant to today's workplace. So I asked ChatGPT what to do, and also asked colleagues for other ideas. So these are the ideas, such as making the question longer, which is not ideal, making it more complex, making it uncopyable, which is not good for accessibility. ChatGPT had a few different ideas, but it didn't roll with those either. Or integrating generative AI into assessment for a collaborative assessment, which is good for higher level studies, but for the basic one, it wasn't that great either. So what did we do in this case? We generated an additional, well, I wrote an additional Python library with many functions and files hosted on GitHub. And within these functions, we had different movement capabilities of the buffalo or different plotting. And the students had to interact with this GitHub library. And I hosted the documentation on a separate website. The questions were still basic questions about writing a class, a subclass, or plotting. So we were still testing basic Python in this case. So how did this go? We actually had similar grades to previous years. The students did learn some additional new skills, so they had to work with GitHub, integrating this new library, using external libraries, and reading the documentation. The good thing about this library is that the documentation hasn't been fed into ChatGPT in the data set, so it doesn't know what's involved inside this Buffalo library. We still tested the basic Python programming skills, and students do generally try to solve the assignment themselves. The cons, it was a bit of a harder startup cost for both staff and students. So I had to write this Buffalo library alongside my colleague Andrew. We had to write the documentation. And for the students, they had to learn how to use GitHub a little better and to integrate that into their Python IDE. So it was a bit more effort required in both cases. But there are still ways to get around interacting with the library. So I did see one solution where a student had accidentally generated an entire different Buffalo library because they'd fed the question into ChatGPT, but it didn't know what functions I'd written. And it still feels like we're outrunning the AI, whereas I'd prefer to write more collaborative, futuristic assessments. But this is on the to-do list, and I'm very interested to have discussions and to learn more about what other people are doing. For the future of AI in statistical education, there are some exciting opportunities to update our intended learning outcomes to match the modern workplace and to enhance student learning experience. As educators, it's our role to harness these tools responsibly and effectively, ensuring they complement rather than replace fundamental statistical reasoning. And we must maintain academic integrity, which is quite hard when you've got an online master's course and your assessments are online. But we want to develop assignments that reflect real-world practice. I wanted to highlight a few upcoming workshops and conferences. So we are hosting UK COTS, the UK Conference on Teaching Statistics, here in Glasgow in June. And Ozan, the next speaker, and I will also be hosting the Higher Education Teaching and Learning series in Edinburgh about rethinking teaching and learning in mathematical sciences in times of generative AI, which is a follow-on workshop from the workshop we had in Glasgow last year. So we look forward to having Michael speaking there.